Innovation is in our veins. Soon the whole world will know our names. Sharing our knowledge and freedom reign. We here for the people, you know it's our way. Setting foundations is part of the dream. It doesn't matter if you're new to the game. Listen up now, cause we all gon' say, elevate, 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 higher, elevate, 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 higher. We gon' rise up, we all gon' shine. Work through adversity, stay on the grind. Elevate, elevate, this is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, everyone. It's so great to have you all on one more time. It's your boy Josh.
And Reg.
And we're grateful to be back on with you yet again. Well, there's a lot to get into, and we're excited to be here on this delayed episode week. First, we're getting into, is inflation really falling? Is it really what it's all cracked up to be? Will we be seeing a cut in interest rates coming up? We'll be talking about that, as well as we hope you enjoyed your Victoria Day long weekend. We know we did. And we also hope that you had that good old time at the barbecue as the liberal push their propaganda of what you should be talking about at the barbecue to fight against the conservative narratives. Lastly, we'll be also talking about how CSIS is viewing gender ideology, or people who oppose gender ideology, as extremists in this country and something taken very seriously. And this and so much more. We're excited to get into it. Reg, how you feeling, big dog?
Doing great. I rode here on my motorcycle, so I got that in and feeling pretty good. I was cruising along there at a speed that I will not mention.
Good call.
And I freaked out at one point because there was a bug that just came in. It must have been a June bug or something. And it just biffed right off the front of my visor. And I was just like, whoa. Was that?
Gee, that's no fun.
Yeah, so that coming at a speed that I will not mention was a little bit shocking, but I'm feeling good. Feeling good. Got lots of sun, got lots of time in the garden. Fingers are still covered in dirt, so feeling good.
Good. We love to see it, dude. Yeah, I had myself a good old weekend too. Went down to see some friends down in Boston. And we had some good old chats down there, talked some politics, talked about what's happening down there in the States. They're asking me what was happening up here in Canada, as those friends have moved from Canada down to the States, and they've been out of the country, I think, close to 5 or 6 years now. So it's like, yeah, we don't really see much what's going on in Canada. Fill us in. And what a fun conversation that was. And there's like, wow, that's interesting. That literally the whole country hates Trudeau. I was like, yeah. You guys are having a different problem down here, upcoming here in November, where there's still a bit of a debate of who they want to be president. People are very, they know who they want out. They just are a little divided on who they want in. And that's the issue we're seeing. So it was all fun. Chad, so my favorite topic though, dude, can't get enough of it. But we talked about the idea of relative truth. Your truth, my truth, and how I think that stuff sucks. And how it's BS, and that right there is the truth. And so,
is it now?
Yeah, it is now. I'm an absolutist when it comes to truth. I know there's a lot, especially we live in a day and age of relative truth. I don't believe in it. I'm a huge believer in there is truth, and then there's your perspective, and you can have your perspectives, but there is a fact, something that's factually true here, and there's no delineation or subjectivity to it. And I know I'm opening up this debate for our listeners, and I'm sure we're getting a lot of messages on this, but Reg, that's my stance. Hit me up.
Oh, I just want to first thank you for speaking your truth.
Shut up.
He's all flustered now. He can't even press the right button.
Nope. You're right.
I pressed that button.
I'm just hitting buttons now.
Yeah. Anyway, I guess it's semantics, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I agree with you. I think that there are things that are objectively true and objectively false. I also think that there's perspectives on things. And so what somebody can believe to be true for them, and they can wholeheartedly believe it to be true, might not be the case for somebody else. So that's where I'm just like, it is a game of perspectives, because when you think about like how people view like different ways of being, like, yeah, that is in this culture's language now, that is their quote unquote truth. And so I do think that multiple things can be true based on perspectives that people hold, but like some things I do think are objectively false. Like somebody saying that the earth is flat. I do not believe that the earth is flat. I think that is objectively false, and that it is true that the earth is a sphere. You know what I mean? So things like that. But as far as like subjective things, I'm like, that's a gray area. Where is right? Where is wrong? I don't think there's actually a truth in a lot of those subjective things.
I agree with that. You know, like Justin Trudeau being the worst prime minister in history. That is getting closer to objective, but still subjective for many.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that could be the truth of people who view that.
Shut up.
That's their opinion.
That's their opinion. You're right.
Yeah.
That's their opinion.
So for them, it's true. But for other people, it might not be true.
Yeah. That's just their perspective.
Yeah. Which is funny because like when you first said, we got into a conversation about truth and I almost spit out my water everywhere. So it's like, oh, good.
Tell me more.
Yeah. Especially because like as an evaluator. Oh, I did it again. Yeah. I don't know why I say it that way. I think it is because of the S's.
Yeah.
So one of the things I get tongue tied a little bit because tongue's tied a little bit too much on underneath, and a lot of people these days they actually get it clipped. And I'm like, I'm an adult. I've done this for many years now, 33 years to be exact. I don't need that, but it still makes the S's hard. So
wow, so the person who called it out in our comments is making fun of your disability. Wow, what a guy, worst person ever. You hate the disabled. Gee.
No, I don't have a disability. That's my truth. Anyway. Especially
let's go
get lots of S in there. Now it just sounds really it sounds like I belong to a different community now.
True.
Anyway, weird word. All this to say, when you talk about perspective, that's when I think that truth gets used a little bit differently. And as we learned a second ago, words are also subjective. So they mean different things to different people, right?
No. Only if the Oxford Dictionary ever did their friggin' job, then we can talk about it. But I'm not getting into that right now. I'm not getting into that.
Key story is we looked up a word and it didn't mean what Josh thought it meant.
But it also meant what I thought it meant, which is crazy to me.
Depending on the dictionary you go to.
Which is psychotic. Like this should not, as I said, I'm an absolutist in some cases, and this is one of them. I'm like, why are we just making up definitions for the same word out here? Like, let's just make one definition for one word. This is why the left drives me nuts. It's because this happens. And so anyways, it's obviously an unrelated word at this point. But hey, I'm curious.
Thank you for your truth, Josh.
Yeah, shut the heck up. I'll put this out as a fun little Q&A for the homies. What do you think the word meek means? M-E-E-K. What does the word meek mean? Spell it out. Put it in a sentence. Let us know. We'd love to hear it from you. But on that note, inflation is falling. Prices are coming down, apparently, based on our finance minister here in this country, Chrystia Freeland, down to 2.7%. I'm excited as someone who has on a variable rate mortgage. Oh, does that mean more interest rates are going to get cut here soon? Hope to see it. But we all know lots of fugazi these days, a lot of smoke and mirrors. Now it's here, now it's not with this government. And we want to know what this 2.7 number actually means. And is it hopeful for us? We've gotten into it. Reg has specifically gotten into it. So hit us up.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think that we need to dispel is this idea about things coming down. So the only thing coming down is the actual inflation percentage. And so what's happening, and I noticed this in a couple conversations I tested with before even coming on the show with a couple different people. They're like, oh, so does that mean that the price of food, groceries, things like that are coming down? I was like, no, unfortunately, I wish. When you see the change in inflation go from 2.9 to 2.7%, all that means is things aren't getting as expensive as quickly. They're still getting more expensive. They're still getting 2.7% more expensive this month than they were before, where they were at 2.9%. So that's also an average. So that's not actually like everything. So they have a basket of items that they include in that. So that's food, that's clothing, shelter. I'm trying to remember the other ones, but basically all the necessities of life they put in this basket. And then they have some discretionary spending items as well.
And depending on the time of year too, they will swap things in and out for it too.
Exactly.
Which is subjectivity.
Tell me again about truth. Anyway, the truth in this is that no, things are not getting cheaper in Canada. And I think that's kind of the misnomer that's happening right now when they're out there celebrating. They're like, oh my God, we went down from 2.9 to 2.7. Hooray. Inflation is coming down. So therefore life is getting better. It's like, no, life isn't going to hell as quickly. That is what we're seeing here. And so one of the things that I think was interesting was that I saw this actually come up on TikTok with a couple different commenters commenting on this exact thing. People thinking that it meant that life was getting cheaper, and it's not actually. And so one of the things I wanted to bring up is the fact that when you look at the things that are still on the rise, shelter is going up by 6%. So that's far outpacing the inflation. Yeah. That's almost double what the inflation rate is. And when we look at things that are, in the food category, so vegetables, dairy, eggs, all up. Essential food items to lead a happy, healthy life in Canada, all going through the roof. Luckily, if you're doing my kind of thing, trying to homestead a little bit, the reason why I was hands in the dirt all weekend is because I got a whole thing of manure and a whole thing of topsoil brought in so that I could actually garden and plant my potatoes and corn and veggies, because vegetables are through the roof and we're only seeing them get more expensive month over month. And so when Chrystia Freeland says 4 months in a row, inflation has been within the target range and fell to 2.7%. This is good news for Canadians. It's really not. It's like subjective good news in the sense, like I said, that it's not as bad as it could be, but it's just still bad. And the things that are causing this to be bad are the massive amounts of immigration, the Bank of Canada interest rates on shelter, the carbon tax on fuel, which is causing fuel prices to go through the roof because fuel is actually included in this as well. And so when we look at those key elements and then also throw on the massive amount of debt that the government is incurring in order to pay for all the ills of society that they're in fact creating, it's a downward spiral. And so it's concerning when I see messaging like this. And then you see a lot of liberal supporters, far left, like quoting this, touting this as the greatest thing since sliced bread. And it's like, no, actually, when you look at discretionary spending, it's down. So discretionary spending, say this word correctly so I don't get dragged, is your footwear, clothing, household items, household wares, things like that. The people aren't buying. Those are down because they just can't afford it. And who provides that? Your industry, your private industry. And what have we been seeing lately? We've been seeing private industry actually going down, taking a nosedive, the amount of small businesses going down, and then actually some direct attacks on small business from different liberal messaging. And it's like, this is the wrong way. So it's concerning. And if I were you, I would be planting my vegetable garden and maybe looking into getting some chickens because it's about to get more expensive.
Yeah, it's going to continue. And I think it's so easy to buy into that messaging. Even when you're kind of looking at quickly or kind of seeing it out in the regular world, like, oh, 2.0, it's coming down. It was at 4%. It was at 5%. It was at 6%. So there's 2 ways. That's a little bit better. But that means it still isn't coming down. If we really want to see a full revert back to where things were at pre-pandemic, that we need to see a negative 10%. We need to see a negative 6% of that in terms of inflation, right? Like that's what we need to see. Will we see it? Never.
No.
but this is like the low numbers. We're trying to get back to that 2% target. I was like, well, you already screwed it up, hitting close to 7% in inflation rate for months. So we're kind of screwed 6 ways to Sunday at this point, no matter what. And that's kind of the messaging of people kind of get misconstrued, unfortunately, through this type of stuff.
Yeah, and the interesting thing too is that I'm worried about the Bank of Canada holding rates because we're still not at the 2%. I'm not quite sure what the banks are saying. Have you seen what the banks have commented?
Yeah, dude. They're still sticking to rate cuts next month.
Really? Still
sticking to it.
See, I think that the banks usually, they have a good nose for these things. So if they're sticking to rate cuts, then I would say that a good bet would be on rate cuts, but I don't know. I'm not hopeful just based on the way that this government has been spending money.
Well, it's been a huge debate even amongst my friend group as well. Like a lot of people having the exact same mentality you are. And if I'm being honest, it's also an emotional reaction for me too. It's like, there's no way on God's green earth we're going to see any cuts happen the way things are going. But when I look at black and white paper and the big 5 banks, all 5 of them saying we're going to see rate cuts in June, it conflicts with me of like my emotions versus the facts I'm seeing on paper right now. But we'll see what happens in June. I know TIFF is doing a lot of fear mongering and trying to like put a lot of FUD into the economy to make sure that people don't go crazy and do a bunch of spending. So I think that's a big part of the messaging that's happening right now. But he knows inevitably he's going to have to cut rates, especially as we're coming up on a lot of people renewing their mortgages.
And that's kind of what I was thinking as well, as the mortgage rate renewals. I think that depending on how many are going to start coming due, because we know that the summer months is when people have bought houses traditionally. Yeah. So if they all bought their houses and they're all looking to renew their mortgages, then now would be the time that you'd start to see rate cuts. And if all 5 big banks are saying, yes, we need to, or we're expecting a rate cut, I'd say your odds are pretty likely that you're going to see a rate cut, especially because we saw the GDP come out in a positive way. Mm-hmm. Even though that's not actually real GDP, it's not reflective of GDP per capita. Either way, they're going to look at that and say, oh, GDP's improved. We brought inflation down by 0.2. So therefore, possibly a rate cut. And I think that to bet on the big banks would probably be a safe bet.
Yeah, and no matter what, like they will use any stat to their advantage here, no matter how BS it is. And that's what we'll see here. As you said, like the GDP, just as a number, doesn't really mean anything, especially the way we've like artificially inflated our population here to make our GDP look better. But when we start to bring it down per capita, good luck with that. Everyone's losing money over here.
Yeah, and it was funny because I actually had the privilege of sitting with an economist, and I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but I went to an evaluation conference a while back, which was why I was virtual in the other episode, and I got to sit across from an economist, and we actually had a discussion on this, and he's like, yeah, GDP is garbage. He's like, we need a GDP per capita. He's like, that's the number they should be reporting. He's like, but they wouldn't dare report it.
Jeez.
And I was like, oh my. I was like, are you conservative? And he's like, no, I'm a red liberal. And I was like, okay.
I guess I'll picture the conversation, just you like, are you conservative?
Yeah.
No, not me. No. Liberals all day, all night, twice on Sunday.
Yeah. So. It was like, how do we, I did it tactfully because I was just like, oh yeah, like, would this be because of like conservative criticism of government? And he's like, oh, no, I'm a liberal. And I was like, okay, cool.
He's like, okay.
I'm gonna stop talking now.
Good call, dude. We love to see it. But yeah, I think that's some interesting insight on terms of what's happening here with that number, and it is the very minimum. Yet it coming down is a positive thing, but you will never see what we saw pre-pandemic at this point unless there's some serious changes made in terms of policy.
Yeah.
So, which. Who knows when that will happen? But I hope you guys had a great long weekend because we know our liberal friends did. It was fantastic. I almost choked. Friend of the show, Money Mark, sent this to me in my DMs, and then I saw it on Twitter after, and I was like, "This liberal party really went out and did this." They tweeted out, "Barbecue banter, get the latest sizzle on everything liberal." Oh yeah, the wordsmith over there. And this tweet. Liberal Party says, it's a long weekend. And we know things can get political at the barbecue. Don't show up empty-handed. Click here to get the latest sizzle on everything liberal.
Pause for a second, because like, honestly, that was well done. Good marketing. It flows. I'm saying good job marketing team for the Liberal Party on that one. And also the fact that they're putting out talking points to the Liberal members so they can all be speaking the same thing and using the same rhetoric. It's culty, but it works. And like, it's a lot better than Spike the Hike, I'll say.
Yeah, it is very culty. And it's just, I hated it. I hated every second of this. I was like, oh man, you get these homies, they're just going to keep saying the same thing because they read it on the liberal website. It must be true. So I went through some of these questions that they put into this, things that you should have answers for. Mm-hmm. And, oh man, here we go. I'll throw this one. Pierre Poilievre, this is the statement. Pierre Poilievre is exactly the kind of leader the Conservatives need. And their answer to this was, firstly, anytime someone starts taking notes from infamous American conspiracy theorist Alex Jones, you should take anything they say with a grain of salt. And again, Pierre Poilievre doesn't care about Canadians. He has repeatedly called for cuts to programs that middle-class Canadians depend on, including $10 a day childcare, the Canada carbon rebate, the 3.87 million affordable homes we're unlocking for Canadians, and so much more.
Yeah. So what I put in the notes that very one as well. So what I copied out of there was that he'd rather promote the interests of his corporate lobbyist friends. I'm like, excuse me, sir. Like,
let's talk about that.
Which party has been embroiled in scandals? Like GC Strategies and Friends are now up to what, $1 billion worth of taxpayer dollars that have been funneled to them and others. So yeah, this, and like the fact that they pulled out the Alex Jones card, like
beautiful.
This person, Pierre Poilievre, is exactly the kind of leader that the Conservatives need. Said nothing about Alex Jones.
No.
Absolutely nothing.
No.
And it's like, why did you bring that into the conversation?
Because it's Alex Jones, man. Get the clickbaits going. We love to see it.
And that's exactly what this is. It's just all just clickbait kind of gotcha type rhetoric. But anyway, just foolish.
My favorite one.
Oh, you're going to the other one? What's the other one I picked?
I love this one. The Liberals' woke policies have gone too far. Let's see the answer the Liberals have to this. It's just too easy to roast this claim. Pierre Poilievre's conservative politicians are complaining about woke paper coffee lids to distract from the fact that their only plans are to make deep cuts to programs Canadians rely on and bring far-right American-style politics to Canada. Pierre Poilievre has continuously demonstrated that hate, discrimination, and name-calling are welcome to in his Conservative Party. And in the past few weeks, we've seen him tell far-right extremists, everyone's happy with what you're doing, resort to personal attacks in the House of Commons, and allow his MPs to reopen the abortion debate.
Isn't that a sandwich of items there? You know, even throwing in the abortion debate and then Mr. Trump's face right underneath it, right? Like just everything the left hates all thrown in one nice little package for you.
Get them
like
fired up.
Oh, that's great.
Get them fired up. He's just like Poilievre, Trump, same person, right? Yeah. And that's the goal there. And that abortion debate, I mean, I know we talked about it, like in terms of like our TikTok, we threw it out there, but man, them really like just clamping on to a petition that was surfaced in the House of Commons as real policy the Conservatives are putting forward is wild to me.
I know. And it's funny because like we even saw when we went to the Canada Strong and Free conference, like they were like, we're not talking about abortion. Like if you're talking about freedom and liberty and things like that, abortion is part of that, just the same way as vaccines are. And so the whole messaging there was you can't be for half freedom. You have to be for it all the way. And so part of the freedom though is for these people to say, well, I represent my constituents and they want this. So we're putting forward this petition that they have signed. Just the same way you do every other petition. But it's completely stirred up controversy in the media right now. And you have Jagmeet Singh being like, see, they're attacking women's rights. They don't want contraceptives through pharmacare. And look, they're going after abortion. And it's funny because the amount of people that's worked on is wild. And I've had conversations with folks being like, that's not the stance of like 80%, maybe higher of the Conservative Party. Like it's not going to go through.
It's
and
like maybe 2 MPs, 3 MPs.
Yeah, exactly. And nobody who's actually conservative in my field of view that I talk to are really touting for this abortion turnover. And then everybody's just like, yeah, well, we didn't think that about Roe v. Wade. And I'm like, oh my God. So
don't get me started on Roe v. Wade,
it's
bro.
Painful.
Yeah. It's the same old BS.
Yeah. And like, man, you would have to have all the provinces agree. You'd have to have everybody come together because of the way that our system is set up. Everyone, and then you'd have to have a majority of people in both the House and the Senate, which we know that Trudeau is stacked with Liberals, with more Liberals being added in the next month. So there's no way this would go through. And to just try and put that out there is a complete red herring.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I just thought, again, they just keep slipping these things in, just trying to seed little seeds of doubt in people's minds. And hey, all parties do it. It's all of it. Just trying to get people to really trying to paint the other side in a specific way and get them, to be hated by people. We get it. But man, I hate this type of politics. It sucks.
Yeah. And the Liberals aren't innocent the Conservatives are not innocent in this either. I mean, that's what they've been doing as well. And unfortunately it works. But what I think is also interesting here is them saying about the name calling and the fact that there's personal attacks in the House of Commons. And what did we see just the other day?
We saw Chrystia Freeland.
Yeah, let's talk about our finance minister. So for those of you who didn't get to see this, basically what happened is Pierre opened up the same conversation that we've been hearing for a while now around the opioid crisis, because it is a crisis happening across Canada. And so he was talking about the fact that will this government commit to, recriminalizing and reducing the opioid crisis and addressing it. And Chrystia Freeland takes a moment to say this.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader is wearing more makeup than I am today. Now, I think it's wonderful.
Order! I'm going to ask the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance to withdraw that comment. We don't comment on the appearances of members. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, I withdraw that comment.
This is how this works, right? That's what she says, and she did it she knew she was gonna get reprimanded for it, but she just wanted to put it out there, and then I'll recoil it from the record. But it's for this moment on this podcast is why she did it. It's like it's gonna get clicks. I get to look like a champion roasting Poilievre, and then I'll recant because it's a stupid statement.
It is, yeah. And it's exactly what you said. And this is literally what I was saying to a friend of mine today. I said, when you go and you watch the House of Commons and they literally stand up and just say the stupidest crap out there, nothing's actually being worked on, nothing's actually being done because they're just too busy throwing it a dunk.
Yeah.
And then sitting down, and then when they've sufficiently felt like they've dunked on the other person, they get up and leave. And they peace out. We watched it in person happen when we were up in Ottawa. Annoying, stupid. And also the fact that this is the party that's so inclusive. Why would you need to comment on the appearance of another member? Why? That has nothing to do with the opioid crisis. How is that helpful? You're deliberately creating a divide in this conversation that we now can't get back to the conversation on a very serious crisis where people are dying literally every hour across this country. And you have the audacity to stand up and comment on somebody's appearance. Gross.
Yeah.
Crappy politics.
And it's only seems to be getting worse. And it's really interesting when we talk about the impact social media has had on our society. It's very interesting to see how it's impacted our politics, where this is literally what MPs do now. There's they're crafting their statements and they're crafting their responses now of what's going to get the most clicks on social media instead of the things that are actually going to help our country. And that is such a bummer. I hate that that's where we're at right now, but that's just the reality. We need the pithy statements like axe attacks, and we need the stupid comments like this in the House of Commons, or what happened a few weeks back when Pierre got tossed out of the House of Commons. That's where our politics are at now.
Yeah.
And the fact that Chrystia really felt as you said, had the audacity to say this in the House of Commons in a professional setting is crazy. And I actually felt comfortable with it too. And smug. And it was a new creative way for her to not answer a question, I guess.
That's true. That is true.
That's different from what she usually does. But you said it we're dealing with a very serious issue here. People are literally dying. People have lost loved ones over this one. And you're getting up with a smirk and making a joke about someone's appearance instead. Liberals are unserious, do not care, and they need to go. Simple as that. That's an example of what they've been like. That's a good summation of what we've been saying.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I said again to another. I got a lot of FaceTime with some friends today.
Seriously, you really did.
It was good. It
How'd
was
you
a
make
good
time
day.
for this?
Yeah, right. But another person I was talking to, they were like, "Oh no, the left really focuses on the issues. They don't go to ad hominem attacks. They don't." And I was like, "Well, actually, a friend of ours, Jennifer, here's the racist comment that was thrown out there about residential schools," and she was just like, "What?" And I was like, "Yeah, go click on their profile and see how they're pro BIPOC and pro like free Palestine and all this other stuff. And it's like, it's just so much hypocrisy. And she was just like in disbelief that this is the rhetoric of the left. And I was like, you're not seeing it.
Seeing all of it, at least.
You're not seeing all of it. And I said, because it's like really craftily done. And it's moments like this where, that's just going to be an attack and it's not going to be helpful in any way. But then the left is going to be like, oh, this is great. We're fighting the evil forces of conservatism. Look at us getting our jab in. And then they're going to celebrate this as a win. And it's like, this is not a win for Canada. This is actually a waste of tax dollars, a waste of breath. Like, why? And we're seeing that in so many instances. And it's exactly what you said. It's completely designed for social media. It's designed for that 2-second TikTok that somebody can throw up there and then comment on it. And then it's going to get circulated everywhere. And then it's going to be questions of like, well, why was Pierre wearing makeup? Like, and then questions about his masculinity, questions about his, ability to lead. And then it's just going to be annoying. And it completely distracts from the main purpose of that comment prior to that of focusing in on the opioid crisis. So
imagine that.
I know, right? But it is, like you said, a new way to deflect from actually answering a question.
Gee, I'll give it to her, I guess. On that note, Trudeau made a trip down south today. Went down, paid his respects, and talked to some politicians down in Philadelphia. And he's talking about the biggest thing that we're threatened with is misinformation and disinformation here in this country. And, we'll play the clip here.
We're at a time right now where democracy itself is under significant challenges. And I can't be here in the birthplace of American democracy without reflecting a little bit on the fact that democracy didn't happen by accident. It didn't happen by accident because people came together to try and build it and create it and worked really hard at it. It didn't happen by accident, and it doesn't continue without effort. And I think one of the big challenges we have is we're taking things for granted. We're allowing misinformation and disinformation to infect our body politic and our citizens. And people are not seeing the way some of the building blocks of the freedoms and the successes that we've been able to build in two of the freest countries on earth, Canada and the United States, are now being challenged in pretty fundamental ways. And it goes with the time we're in, where the reality is this is an unbelievably consequential and stressful time for citizens. Whether it's the impacts of climate change, we've already started another wildfire season in Canada, so I apologize in advance if we give you another summer like we did last summer. I mean, it's funny, not funny, because the reality is extreme weather events, whether it's wildfires or floods or droughts, are beginning to convince even the largest climate skeptics that the cost of inaction on climate change is far greater than the cost of acting responsibly to build both resilience but also reduce our climate emissions as countries and as a world.
But it was just still kind of a wild statement in general. It's like it gets into the wildfires, gets into how, literally uses misinformation after saying that's our biggest threat in this country. And also the states are feeling it too. And we get it. We totally understand. It was such a joke of a statement.
Yeah. And it's funny because I feel like we're on a theme tonight of like, what do words mean? And so misinformation, disinformation, those were two. I was like, it just sounds like lies to me. Like, why are we creating these extra words? So I actually looked up what they mean according to the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. So according to the Canadian Cybersecurity, misinformation refers to false information that is not intended to cause harm.
Yeah.
But disinformation refers to false information that is intended to manipulate, cause damage, guide people, organizations, and countries in the wrong direction. If we use these definitions, how many times would members of parliament be actually called up on disinformation?
Right.
Like, honestly, in every political spectrum.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And that's why it was such a funny statement that he made in this press conference where he, talks about this is the biggest threat. But like we see it from him consistently. We saw it from him in that presser. And then as well as we're seeing it constantly throughout all the politics in the country or from our MPs. And then our MPs have their media people who then espouse these things. And then they start talking to social media creators who then espouse these things. And it's just a cycle that continues on and on and on. It's like, I mean, if he's being honest, I don't know if it's our number one threat, but it is a threat. Misinformation, disinformation. But the problem is we're getting it from the people we're supposed to be trusting.
Yeah.
So that's tough.
And that's why we saw in the Poilievre report, like record lows of trust and record highs of anger. Like it's because I actually don't disagree with him a little bit, actually, when he talks about misinformation, disinformation. The problem is it's really rich coming from him. Mm-hmm. So
ain't that the pot calling the kettle black?
Exactly. But yeah, even the mention of the wildfires was the thing that I thought was so good. And I threw a little link into a creator that actually broke down some of the wildfire data, which I thought was really, really cool.
And he talks about axing the tax. He talks about stopping the fight against climate change at a time where the country is burning, at a time where floods and storms are having an impact on every corner of the country, and at a time when Canadians are struggling with the cost of living. He wants to take away checks that put more money in their pockets. His ideology is so strong, he would rather watch the country burn and Canadians suffer than continue to fight against climate change and put...
Let's take a look at some fire data. We're not burning up like JT is describing. Isn't it funny that every time there's a fire in Canada, JT loves to go in front of a press conference and say, look, we are burning up, pushing fear on Canadians so that he can come around and say, look, we need to charge more carbon tax so we can eliminate fires in Canada, a naturally occurring event. People in Canada are more fearful of not being able to feed their children food than they are of climate change. This man has completely lost touch with reality. Here's some data. Annual fire starts since 1992. Take a look at the trend. We are actually going down in fire starts in Canada. Total area burned in Canada. Last year we had a record year, but if you remove last year, in the 90s, it was way worse. We're actually lower than in the 90s. How convenient that we have less fires that started, yet we have more area burned. It looks like we didn't even try to turn these fires out. This next chart is gonna blow your mind. Annual area burned in the US. Take a look in the 30s. We are way below what it was in the past. I'm sure they're going to take down these statistics.
And so, like what you're seeing there, very obviously, and like he said, you know, if you take last year's out, which we know last year's was multiple individuals starting fires on purpose, like they've been charged, it's on record that they have started these fires across the country in different provinces. Like, it's wild. We are seeing I never saw that graph before, the amount of forest fires that have gone down. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that will be because of good forest fire suppression and changes to how we deal with forest fires. But he's right. Forest fires are a naturally occurring part of our ecosystem. There's actually parts of Halifax, the HRM, that the trees in that area, when you look at them, they're called jack pine. We did a whole thing in my master's on it because I did a master's of resource and environmental management, that the only way they can reproduce is by fire. And so you find them in areas that are prone to fire. Rightfully so, because a fire is a naturally occurring part of our environment. Not saying that that's something we want to continue with, but the fact that you're using forest fires as an indicator of climate change and pushing through this whole narrative, that to me is disinformation. It's not misleading by accident. It's purposely intended to mislead and guide people to a certain point of view. And that's what's happening.
Yeah. I really appreciate that video. You know, it was really cool to see the charts and just see that, wow, we're doing actually a lot better than we've ever done. This is really great news. Our efforts of trying to be watchful and putting, resources into, addressing wildfire issues or things that are prone to wildfires is fantastic. We love to see it. But you look at the news, you would think opposite. You would think otherwise. And when we had a record-setting year last year for wildfires, which I think it's a very small percentage of it was naturally done. Like, it's crazy how much was set by just people. It was arson, which is bonkers to me. But that will always be seen as the summer. Like, it was so bad. Here's a carbon tax.
Yep.
We need to increase it. And I thought it was a funny statement. It's like, yeah, well, people are more scared about how they're going to feed their families. But yeah, we're going to make it about forest fires.
And the big thing to take away from those graphs too is that we're focusing and creating extremely restrictive and harmful policy based on an anomaly. Even if you take out the fact that, like we said, that a lot of these were arson, because you get people who are like, oh, well, if it's somebody's campfire ran out of control. It's like, no, these people were actually deliberately lighting forests on fire. And if you take that out and you just look at this and say, okay, look at this record-setting year, you look at that and say, this is an anomaly. We should be basing our policy and our action on the trend, not on the anomaly. That's just data 101. When we actually look at population data and anything for health, we consider the anomalies. We actually rationalize whether or not they belong in the data set, but then we base our instructions and our recommendations on the trend, because you can have an off year, but that should not dictate the policy for the next 50 years, because otherwise you run into situations like we have right now.
Absolutely. Well, for the July long weekend, Canada Day, in a month and a half or so, we will be putting out our own PDF of things you can answer liberals with at the barbecue. This will be one of them. I was messing. But yeah, that was very insightful. And I think it's really important to first off, sure, let's get the political jousting out of the way and okay, whatever. Honestly, just as a person who lives in this country, to see that our wildfire occurrences are going down is really cool to see. Mm-hmm. That actually makes me really happy, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Well, it's a message of hope that they're completely warping into fear. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that's really annoying. And I know I'm bringing back the politics of it, but it's true. When you look at this, we should be hopeful and saying, wow, our efforts to combat forest fires have really proven effective. You can see the trend going down. That's awesome. That's not the message that's being told with this. So,
yeah. But that's the message we're going to put out with our listeners. We're going to clip this, TikTok it, YouTube it. We're putting this one out and I really try to amplify this brother's voice. I'm sure the video did plenty well on its own, but we're going to keep adding to it. So, but CSIS is really, obviously they're our defense. That's what they are. And one of the things that has come up is the fact that, and this is coming from the post-millennial, CSIS suggests that those who oppose gender ideology are a violent threat in Canada. Again, this is post-millennial who tend to lean more right-leaning. But it was interesting. They did kind of talk about different things that came out of this report. This was talked about and reported on back in February by CBC and others. But then as well, additionally, more data came forward in an actual full report and on May 7th. And that's why it picked up again. But it says in its annual report for 2023, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service says that Canadians opposed to a gender ideology are a possible violent threat. The annual report states that CSIS assesses that the violent threat posed by the anti-gender movement is almost certain to continue over the coming year, and that violent actors may be inspired by the University of Waterloo attack to carry out their own extreme violence against the LGBT community or against other targets they view as representing the gender ideology agenda. While saying that the anti-gender movement poses a significant threat to Canada's national security, the report then admitted while the movement may collectively hold extreme views, CSIS assesses that only a small portion of adherents are willing to engage in serious violence.
I think this is just annoying, honestly. I've got a couple thoughts. So my first thought is that obviously we don't condone any violence towards any group. That's just straight up.
Simple.
Yep. There's a truth for you. Don't condone violence against any group. Also, the fact that they released this report in its full glory, but yet withheld the RCMP report on threats to Canada. why did this one make it out there without the million redactions and the other one not? That's interesting.
Interesting question.
Yeah, right? And then the last thing I have to say is like, they've also said in this report that they can't find good examples, but they view this as a potential threat. So this is all posturing, maybes, could happen. It just, to me, it seems like there's not enough meat to it.
Yeah.
Like if I think about the things that are really ticking off Canadians, this one's annoying, but it's nothing compared to the cost of living crisis and the opioid crisis and the myriad of crises around housing and homelessness. Like I really don't see this as being it. And so that's why I'm like extremely mad that they talk about this being the big threat. And it's like when we saw from the RCMP report that actually housing and homelessness is going to be one of the major disruptors to peace and harmony in our country. So I don't know, annoying.
Yeah. Well, what I thought was really interesting about the report is that's how they started it off. It's like, well, this group of people, they could get violent. But then as the report progressed, it was like, they're actually not that bad. It's not that big of a deal. Like that's what ticked me off about it the most. It's like they had this like big bark at the beginning, hoping people stop reading there. And then by the end, it's like, yeah, it wasn't that big of a deal. It's this type of like, with an organization that is supposed to just be nonpartisan, supposed to just speak the facts of what they're seeing, it feels the way this report was structured that there was an agenda behind it, which I'm not a huge fan of. And they're basing it off of one attack that happened at Waterloo. How about the myriad of attacks and things that are happening against the Jewish community in this country? And people just openly speaking out against how they want death to that group. But that's not a threat at all.
No, that's actually not entirely true. They do mention anti-Semitism.
They mention anti-Semitism. It's not on the headline of what the report was it?
No, it wasn't.
That's BS. Don't give me that crap.
They do mention it in there.
They do,
but it is not
twice.
But it is not the focus of the article. You're right. But I wonder if this is kind of to prop up the funding that the Trudeau government is putting towards, they call it the 2S LGBTQIA plus action plan. So, which has been awarded $1.1 million on a purge fund that targets hateful parents opposing gender ideology and LGBTQ indoctrination. So I'm like, is this just to try and make that spend legitimized? And is that what we're seeing? Because I know we have seen in other cases where the government has funded an organization, given them grants to then go write a report that is supportive of the carbon tax and talk about how great it is, and then make it look like it's a separate third-party body writing this report when you follow the money, it's actually all paid for by the current government through grants and through departments and through the climate change. I was like, what is that called? Climate Change Canada. So is this another example of that? Maybe. Who knows? But then I might be a conspiracy theorist.
You're probably right. It sucks, but that's kind of how government public works in general. Like if you're trying to get funding, you want to understand what the agenda is of the government that is giving out the funds, and you want to kind of make, slant your language a little bit in a specific way so that you can go ahead and get that funding. I'm not saying it's happening here, but I'm talking in general. If you're trying to get like funding from a COA or something like this, like you look at what the mandates are of that organization, and you're trying to, okay, this is our project. This is what we'll slant some language here and there to kind of, make ourselves in line with that mandate. That's just how public works and public government works, period. You could be, I'll say it, you're likely right, is what kind of bums me out about that. Because that's obviously you were joking earlier, but like, yeah, what's, the violence against the LGBT community is the big thing in this report. And then we're like, oh, we're also talking about anti-Semitism. That's kind of been happening since, lately here in the country. And it's like, well, why is that part so quiet? Why is this part so loud when you even said it yourself that it's not really happening? But then the thing that's we're seeing in the news and seeing people out in the streets and Jewish communities being inundated and harassed. That was volume 2 down here. But this is up at 12. So yeah, I'd agree there's some type of politics involved there.
And the hard part too is like when you talk about what does violence mean? Going back to words again, because based on people's subjective truths, the fact that somebody's like, no, I don't want my child learning that. They're like, that's violence against the community. So it's like, are they including that in this? Like, what are they defining as acts against this community? Because I've heard like through different individuals that if you, like, this is the whole reason why we have this Purge the Bad Parents Act funded by 1.1 million from the government, is because parents are like, no, I actually don't believe this. We're going to teach our kids otherwise. And that's considered hateful. So is that included in part of this? Who knows? Because we don't know how they're defining this. And they're calling it violent extremism. And we know from the online harms bill that they are defining comments that are anti the narrative of the government of the day as being hateful and violent and extreme. And it's like, no, they're not. Like, actual violence is violence. Words are not. I'm sorry. I do not believe that. That's my truth. So take it and leave it.
Reg is on one today. Let's go.
And I will say, I play hockey with the LGBTQ plus community.
Yep.
And like, they're not expressing this. This is not what I'm hearing from this group. Like, this just feels like a whole different, like, kettle of fish, I guess I'll say. Yeah. And there is one part of that group, though, that has been very vocal. And even within the LGBTQ plus community, like, they're still not organized or really kind of all singing the same song around a lot of these trans issues, especially like when it comes to gender transition and medically offered puberty blockers to children, like all this stuff like that. That's still a topic for debate. And you can actually talk to the LGBT community because they're still debating it themselves. So when you think about like gender affirming care being mentioned directly, like, so are people within that community who are not supportive of that, you know, for children, does that count as hate? Like, you just taking it all apart, you realize how subjective this whole thing is. And so what is a threat? What is extremism? What is hate? What is counted as hate? Like, it kind of falls apart. And then I look at this and I'm like, oh, wow, this actually like folds up like a wet paper box. Like, it sucks. It's bad use of tax dollars again.
Yeah. It would be interesting to see what their data set was.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's essentially what this conversation comes down to, is like, what was the data set being used and how did they come to the conclusions they did? If we're bringing this down to a scientific response and scientific results, what was really used and how do they define what was the definition from the words they're using and what was the data set they're using? Like, those are legitimate questions when it comes to this report.
Yeah. What are the questions that were asked? When you see a good report come out in any social science, they actually list out the questions that were asked of participants or folks in the study. We don't see that.
Yeah.
So that's an important element that's missing. And like I said, I don't condone harm to any group. And so I think that like actually physically attacking or defaming individuals in this community, I think that's totally wrong. But as far as like what is actually on the horizon for things that are going to make Canadians violent, I don't think this is it.
This won't be. There's a lot of other things going on. So
bigger fish to fry.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of small fish, the Communist Revolutionary Party had their conference in Montreal. Love these homies. Love them. They hate us, but we love them because we believe in love on this side over here, okay? No matter how crazy your ideology is, no matter how many people your ideology has killed over the years, we're loving people over here, okay? This video, obviously there's like a 3-minute TikTok video of like this person going around to all the people at this conference, like, what does communism mean to you? So we pulled out like a minute clip of it. Very interesting.
The working class in Canada is sick and tired of constant oppression. The working class in this country hasn't had a genuine workers' party for likely over 100 years. The NDP has been nothing but a reformist milieu. It is time for a genuine revolutionary communist party that can lead the working class to power in this country. Godspeed, comrades.
So now I'm over here with comrades from Halifax, Cape Breton, and Charlottetown. So how did you guys all get here?
Yeah, we just drove to Halifax and then flew here.
I drove all the way from Halifax. It's about 1,200 kilometers.
Woo!
Flew straight from Halifax.
Nice.
I'm here because this is the first time we're going to see genuine Bolshevik politics active in this country for about 100 years.
The reason I'm here is because, well, I mean, look at all the people here. It really fuels my drive to keep organizing and to keep building, and like, we're gonna fucking win.
We're gonna win.
We're gonna win, boys. Oh, baby. Cue DJ Khaled up in here. Yeah, it was I couldn't believe it. Like, the part that made my skin crawl was like, we're going to bring Bolshevik politics to this country. I was like, oh my gosh. Are we serious here? Oh my, like, oh, what are we doing here, dude?
Do we have a barfing button on this?
I wish we did. I wish we did.
Don't care.
Like, holy smokes. Unreal. These people have ever read a book? Or maybe they have. Maybe they are just more slimy than we give them credit for. But man, what the heck is that?
Yeah, I don't think that they're slimy. I think that what this says is actually what's really disappointing. What's happening is that we've created a society in Canada right now that has been so devastating for the average individual that they can't actually make it anymore. That when you see wages not keeping up with inflation, when you see food going absolutely nuts, when you see that the price of vegetables is through the roof, that you can't actually give your children a healthy meal, that's what feeds this, is people who are so discontent with the status quo that they're looking for anything as an alternative. And they're looking at the current party system that we have right now going, I can't do anything with this. And so they're looking and going, oh, well, communism sounds great. I mean, we get to share things. Everybody gets to work together. We get to build a community that, thrives. And it's like, well, that's kind of how neighborhoods and communities right now work anyway. It's just we're being ripped apart because of the way that our government currently right now is not supporting the infrastructure that we need to keep these communities functioning at an appropriate level, and is taxing us to a point where our dollar means nothing, and that people are working 3 or 5 side gigs so that they can actually just get by, and nobody's getting ahead and everybody's being forced down. So yeah, I can see where this comes from, but going to the Communist Party convention in Montreal is not the answer, folks. Try again. Wrong. You did not win Wheel of Fortune.
Oh man, they're really going to hate us now, even more than they already did. But I agree with all those things. Young people have been given such our generation below have really given a crappy take on life at this point. They didn't get the same benefits that the generation before us did. And yeah, they're looking for other things. And I can empathize with that 100%. But my empathy goes as far as like, oh yeah, I think I'm just going to go join the Nazis. That's kind of where my empathy ends.
Yeah,
I get how someone gets there, but disagree with that you got there. That's kind of how I feel about this. The Bolsheviks politics, get out of my face. But that's crazy.
That's the problem. I don't think that they actually understand what they're saying. I saw this TikTok of an individual who went to a pro-Palestine, what would you call it, a rally protest?
Yep.
And went around asking questions of individuals that were there. And they're like, do you know what this means? And then they explain what it means. And he's like, do you think you'd say it again? And they're like, no, absolutely not.
No.
Yeah. Or the fact that he was like, what is the main mantra of Hamas? And they're like, oh, to free Palestine. He's like, no, it's not. It's to eradicate every Jew on the face of the earth. And they were like, what? Yeah. And
Hitler 2.0?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what I think is happening here. It's like people are hearing the cherry-picked good things. And I think maybe that's the theme of the show is what is the truth? Because basically they're hearing what they want to hear, or they're hearing what's been curated for them to hear through disinformation, and then thinking this is a good thing to get behind. and then they're not even realizing what it is that they're actually supporting, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. And so I'm going to bring this full circle to an episode that happened months ago at this point. Actually, I think we're close to a year at this point.
Okay.
All right. You're going to crack at this. But the Communist Party, or this communist group that has a chapter in Halifax, guess what their meeting place is?
No.
The Glitter Bean.
No.
Going back in time. Yeah, baby. Oh, we jumping. So we'll bring in some listeners. So we did a whole thing where there was a restaurant, bar, coffee bar here in Halifax that was struggling financially. Did a whole GoFundMe campaign to get funding to be able to stay open. It was successful. They're remaining open. We did a whole episode on like how this is like kind of ridiculous to some degrees. But, we weren't supportive of it. Or when you're not providing a service that's not is making enough money, then you're going to go turn to people to then hopefully fund the rest of it. It just seemed like it was their heart was in the right spot, but it just didn't seem like it was the right thing to do.
It's a weird business model. Yeah. It's not a business model that would set you up for success. Admittedly.
So it's just really funny to see it all come back full circle that they are like the hosts for a lot of like the communist events here in Halifax now.
Of course they are. As soon as you're like, guess where their meeting place is, I was like, oh no. It totally is, isn't it? Womp womp.
That's how she goes.
Oh man.
But no, but I go back and forth on this one, right? Where do I cover them? Do we not cover them? Like, do we give them more of a voice? I don't know. I do think it is worth talking about to a degree of like, yeah, like people in this country are starting to think more about this and think more seriously about it. And we need to address it and have a conversation about it, because anytime it's been tried, it's ended horribly for humans.
Yeah, and I'll be the first to say I have a group of friends that we have a group called The Commune, because we were laughing. We were saying, wouldn't it be nice if we all like lived on the same street and could like share resources and things like that? But that's not, it's not the same. So all the people who are out there going, yeah, like I think it would be great if we could like live together, work together, really support each other, lift each other up. That is not this. That's the distinction that we need to make. And like that's called having a active community with neighborhoods and people who are connected to each other. That is not giving and ceding control of all business and production in your country to your government and having them dole out what they think is appropriate, and at the same time executing all educated and rich individuals within the country so that nobody can pose a threat against the almighty government. That's closer to what we're heading for now with this dystopian future. That's not what we want. That's not a sustainable, well-connected community. Two different things.
Could have said it better myself, sir. I think that's a good way to end that one on. And we know we'll see what happens when the messages start flying through. We know that this show, people who listen to the show, are definitely in support and totally agree. But for whatever reason, man, our clips somehow end up on communist TikTok a lot of the time. They let us know that they don't like us. So.
I love it, honestly. Like, to me, hate is love, because if you're taking the time out of your day to put down energy, whether or not it's positive or negative, hey, you're still watching the video. You're still sending that view our way. You're still telling the algorithm to send it to other people. So, you know what? Send the hate, because I don't care.
Let's go, comrades. There we go. All right.
We're no girlfriends.
Let's go. Wild card segment, though. Wild card segment. I think you'll appreciate this. This woman hits on a real truth, I find. And it is a factual truth. It is objective. Okay?
Okay.
And we're going to talk about this.
I'm ready for it.
I mean this with every fiber of respect in my body. As a conservative woman, I do not want conservatives making my coffee. I quite literally want a liberal making my coffee. We all have places in this world. Liberals are great at making coffee, okay? And I walked into a coffee shop today, and it was literally a blue-haired girl with piercings all over, and this is the best latte I've ever had. God is good. God is real.
Oh my.
We all have a place on this earth. It's a beautiful thing, really. So anyways, yeah.
Yeah. Oh man,
that cracked me up though. I was like, you know, like and all the divisiveness between left and right. That was awesome.
Oh
I'm here
man,
for it.
like I have to laugh because you know people are gonna hate that.
Yeah,
they're gonna hate that so much. And it's like, you know what? You have to see the humor in these things. Like nobody is saying somebody needs to be stuck in a dead end job all their life. But that's funny. That's just funny.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, I don't want to see no conservatives making my coffee. It's got to be liberals every time. They know how to make good coffee. What can I say? I've never met a conservative person that like knew how to make good coffee. Come at me. So
I make tea, so that's my thing. My grandparents my grandfather was born in England, so
oh right, yeah, of course.
Brings that, and my great grandma actually, who lived right beside us, straight from England as well, fought in the war, and she had lots of stories to tell us. And every time she told us a story, she would always have a cup of tea. So for me, cup of tea is like just like a nostalgic, nice remembrance to her and to the family there. And it's funny because then my wife, who's native, her mom was a big tea drinker as well.
Oh, beautiful.
So we come from, and it's funny because I don't like coffee actually. And neither does Jen, my wife. And so it's just funny because I was like, I found the only other person on this earth that does not like coffee. And we married each other.
I love that for you. Yeah, I realized I just spoke as if I know this for a fact because I don't drink coffee either. I just go by what my wife says at this point. But it just, you know, where are the good coffee places in Halifax?
I hear the Glitter Bean is serving up some really good coffee.
Yeah.
You know, go send them your patronage. Otherwise, they might have to donate again.
All I know is in the more liberal areas in Halifax is where the good coffee's at. I'm just saying. You know, but here we go. Oh, that was a good dang good show, brother. You were on one. We love to see it. We love to hear it. And that was a good, informative show. We appreciate you. And we appreciate y'all joining us. So, whatever it is you're doing, whether you be working out,
going to get your coffee,
or watching more sports as we get closer to the championship season here in North America. Whatever it is you're doing, wherever you are, we love you. We're out. Peace.